Today's episode, as Mohit said, is very unique. And it's very special to me because it's on a subject which I do not know much about. The subject is art as neighborhood, which for me is a very difficult subject, very difficult to understand. But never mind that, because we have someone as our guest who can elucidate the concept for us. We have with us today Riyas Komu, sculptor and social thinker. He's a thought leader who's been trying to bring art and society closer together. And above all, for those of us who are in love of arts or love of Kerala or of Kochi, he is the co-founder of the Kochi Biennale. He's the co-founder along with Bose Krishnamachari, whom we had on the show a couple of months earlier. And above all that, Riyas Komu is a friend of mine, like almost everyone who's been here, ever since the first Kochi Biennale began. And it began 12 minutes past 12 noon on the 12th of December, 2012. Today again is the 12th of December. So it's 20 years since the first Biennale began. So it's a very special day. Let me welcome Riyas Komu. Riyas Komu really needs no introduction to any of us, or especially to the world of art. Riyas Komu was born in Kerala, but he moved to Mumbai when he was just 20 or 21 to study literature. And like all great men, he switched over from literature and moved to do a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in fine arts from the Sir J.J. School of Arts in Mumbai. And since then, he has been immersed in art and pushing the boundaries of art. His Uru Art Harbour, a cultural hub housed in an old warehouse in Cochin, was an attempt to promote contemporary Indian art that opened in 3 years ago, sometime in November 2017. He also launched a 2-month inaugural exhibition titled Mattanjeri, named after the historic quarter in Cochin, in which the Uru Harbour, Art Harbour is based, which brought together over a dozen artists and research collectives to reclaim that the Mattanjeri. To me, the first concept of a neighborhood that I try to understand. So thank you for being with us, Riyas Komu. Welcome, Riyas, to All That's Kerala Chat Along the Backwaters. Our conversation today, ladies and gentlemen, would be on art as neighborhood, which is a subject which Riyas himself had suggested to me. And I've got a confession to make, Riyas. Art as a neighborhood is not a subject I understand very much. I might have understood the subject more if it had been styled as neighborhood as art. That would have meant to me that we must see our neighborhoods as works of art, as a natural organic art, an unconscious art of the people themselves, an unconscious or even a subconscious people's art. But the other way around, art as neighborhood is much more difficult for me to understand. You're an intellectual. I'm not, Riyas. And to the extent that I've understood you, I believe that you are looking at, say, for example, the nation as a neighborhood, or a city like Mumbai as a neighborhood, or as Cochin as a neighborhood, or earlier, as I said, Mattanjeri as a neighborhood. That is how you are looking at it as a neighborhood. That is understandable, why even the whole wide world can be looked upon as a neighborhood. But what I do not really understand is the concept of art as neighborhood. And I'm sure many of our listeners might also be wondering what art as neighborhood really means. So let's start off by asking you, what do you mean by art as neighborhood? And if the neighborhood, for example, is the nation, the country, India, then art as neighborhood translates into art as the nation or art as the country. My first question to you then, Riyas, is what do you mean by art as the neighborhood? What do you mean, for example, as art as the nation, or art as the country, or art as India? What is that?
Thank you so much, sir, for first of all inviting me to speak on this All That's Kerala forum, and also Mohit, and also all members of Kerala Museum for organizing this. Many levels that I'm very happy to be, in conversation with you, because uh, my, associations with Kochi since last 10 years, we have had many interesting conversations. And I still remember 2014, the opening, you're carrying an umbrella, and, like, where we are all standing, in a heavy rain, and trying to kind of, literally inaugurate the second edition of Biennale. I think that's one of my best memories I have. You along with, you having on the stage and speaking very proudly about Kochi and its, whereabouts, and, the Biennale's inauguration. So, uh, see uh, the why I proposed, when we had a chat, that, art as a neighborhood, since not really 10 years, but since last 5 years, since 2015, I started actually, looking at my involvement with art administration as from a point of view where, how can we, even as an administrator, as an artist, and how can you learn, from a site where you're engaging with. So I started thinking about, the concept of neighborhood through the lens of a post-independent India. Then I thought, we have to, we were in the initial years of post-independent era. We were, we designed our nation as a neighborhood, and we did many interesting projects. If we have time, we can go into it. But as you said, I moved out of Kerala in '92 to study art. In fact, I left literature in Kerala. I was under Calicut University, but I came to study textile design in Bombay, and I continued learning art in Jeju School of Art. That's when, from moving from nation as a neighborhood, I moved to city as a neighborhood. I was trying to kind of literally learn, the idea of, neighborhood, looking at city as a location. Then maybe Kochi was the site, which taught me, the concept of art as a neighborhood, because then there is another project which invoked me, was that subcontinent as a neighborhood. So that I was actually looking at this site as a possible location to study the concept of neighborhood. I'll maybe, before I, as we speak further, we will slowly explore, why art can be a neighborhood. So maybe, I just want to kind of start, before we go ahead. I want to start about, speak about what Srinarayana Guru once said. Once after, the early, after the communities process was formed in Kerala, there was a very interesting debate, and few people came as groups to meet Srinarayana Guru, and they were asking about, how do you deal with your wealth? Then there was one group arguing for a patrilineal approach, and there was another group, fighting for a matrilineal approach. So Guru actually advises them and tells them these are not the way forward for us as a community. We should be neighbor lineal. So I think it's something which attracted me a lot. The concept of, as a community being physically neighbor lineal. Then I was, looking at the other aspects, and there is another unrecorded story again relating with Srinarayana Guru. Was it's about a woman who lost her husband, and they were having family dispute to deal with their own wealth. So Guru again advises her to, do you give the wealth distributed among your families and your children and whoever, but give one big portion of your wealth to your neighbors, because they are going to be, there forever. So I just, I'm actually trying to kind of connect that kind of a conceptual idea that, where if Matanjeri can be a neighborhood to host art, so the community in Matanjeri can conceive art also as their neighborhood. So that's how I started thinking about, because
So you're actually telling Riyaz that art itself is a form of neighborhood.
it is. I mean, in the context of
We got to understand art as a neighborhood. Yeah, that's a concept which I suppose is to me slightly easier to understand. But let me move on. You said you grew up in Bombay. At least your art part grew up in Bombay, in Mumbai, which was your second home. You have gone through the gullies, the by lanes, and the lanes of Bombay. You even have said once that Bombay is your university,
yeah.
and that you love the resilience of the Mumbai cars. How has Mumbai impacted on your art?
I think it's not just the Mumbai as a city. I mean, the timing. I mean, the year I came into Bombay was 1992. As we all know, it was a year, where India was also liberalizing itself as a nation, and this is also a year that we saw the demolition of Babri Masjid, and Bombay city saw riots, and also we saw a lot of other issues like bomb blasts, and other. There was a lot of atrocities that, I mean, which contrasted my life, living in Kerala and coming to Bombay. So that, I think, the initial experiences of coming to Bombay, believing it is one of the most beautiful cosmopolitan settlement, I think those incidents shaped my thinking around, looking into subjects as human settlements, in the city as a biggest, location for human settlements, and migrations to kind of, migrants to move in. So there are many things, like, I mean, one is my education in JJ, but at the same time, Bombay city as a city which had, a very strong history of art patronage, and it's been part of major, the custodian of, like, many great, art, legends, many many connoisseurs. I mean, there was also kind of a, you have seen, an institution like JJ, which is in the heart of the city, like, I mean, bringing out, major talents. So I had that maybe a great, possibility to kind of go through that. But in the context of today's, topic, uh, what I looked at as a subject for me in Bombay was the migrants to the Bombay city, where, see, that's also very much very important to kind of, to connect with when we speak about Matanjeri as a site or a Fort Kochi as a site. When you look at Bombay as a site, it is also a site where, diverse communities come together and live. But I just want to kind of contrast it with by saying that, when why do, people come into a city like Bombay? I mean, where do they escape from? That's something which fascinated me as a topic to study. And those experiences have given me, maybe tremendous energy to kind of look into human settlements as a subject to study in Indian context. And many of the travels which I made, locating from Bombay, the residencies which I did in Karachi, and yeah, I think Bombay is not just being the university. I think the people who have migrated to Bombay, and the stories I've heard from them, has been some of the biggest lessons I have.
You just said that 1992 was the year that you landed in Bombay, and that was a watershed year. Uh, do you think the destruction of the Babri Masjid Mosque impacted on your art?
Uh, I mean, I would say very much, because that's the time that, I mean, I started seeing, like, I mean, a lot of, you know, I mean, what do you say? Like, I mean, a certain sense of marginalization in social space. I mean, especially coming from Kerala. So most of my early art, if you look at some of my shows, some of my travel experience, the reflections of some of my travel experiences into my work, I wanted to kind of discuss conflicting religion, and speak, or look at sites that were the ideas of confluence and ideas of diversity or the ideas of coexistence can come in. Because maybe a post 92 experience as an artist, I was always looking at a site to dissent, a site to kind of locate arguments to kind of to speak about the India's diversity or the constitutional morality. So I think I think it's still impacting me.
Right.
As a subject.
It's a continuum, yes. You also said your mind was always thinking about how to create a site to engage and use the idea of diversity, as you now mentioned, multiculturalism, plurality, etc., by celebrating the histories of human settlement. Those are your words I read. But often the histories of human settlement have been histories of war and conflict, death and destruction. So, how do you reconcile these contradictions? Histories of human settlements have meant wars, destruction, and conflict. How can you celebrate then the histories of human settlements in art?
See, that's where one needs to kind of really try to kind of understand India as a nation. Because see, if you really look at Indian villages as a site, what I'm very much fascinated with, how does a village settlement as a neighborhood coexist? Because it celebrates its own traditions, its own cultures, its own diversities, its own rituals, its own deities. So there is even a kind of lot of ancestral memories. So what our nation has gone through is like because of one major conflict of instilling caste as a kind of a disruptive agent. We have seen people migrating to kind of other kind of settlements where you can live anonymously. So there's a different kind of an anonymity which it provides. So the later, we have seen these human settlements goes into ghettoizations and like other kind of conflicts. We have seen that. That is maybe the junction as a nation we are going through. In that context, I was very much interested in a place like Matanjeri or Fort Kochi, where 40 different communities living together, and it's a microcosm to experiment. As though we see a lot of chaos and violence, as in because of very there are reasons for it. Religion has been a reason, caste has been a reason, economic deprivation has been a reason, terrorism has been a reason. But when it comes to kind of to avoid where do you exercise the possible discourses? That's where I found a place like in a place like Kerala, a location like a Fort Kochi or Matanjeri, where you can exercise it as a site to dissent and also make your own opinion and also celebrate the diversity and plurality and coexistence. I think that's something, I think I've seen a lot of ripple effects of that idea, and many people, coming up with a similar kind of thought processes to engage with the community settlements and, like derive an art project out of it. I've seen it happening in Pune, in Goa, in many other places post-Biennale.
But how can art be integrated into that process, into that interdisciplinary education process? And Ram Menon from Impresario Events, in a sense, you have answered Ram's question. He says, how do you make art more affordable so that it reaches the middle class and even the lower middle class income segments? Very quickly, if you can answer these questions, it'd be very nice.
Yeah, I think, again, going back to Kochi as a site of learning. As we did the project, Kochi was immediately known as a people's biennale, because it brought in, which broke all conventional, thinking around art and its viewership. So, answering the first part of the question, so what we focused was art education, actually. So we realized it's important to kind of educate people about on what kind of art is produced, what are the different terms and streams, and what is the idea of curation, what is installation. So we did an education process there. Into that, we also introduced, if you notice, one major project called Students Biennale, which was never done in the world anywhere else. So we actually connected Kochi with all art institutions in the country and later with the subcontinent also. So Kochi has actually been operating like a site of learning about art practices, and many have benefited out of it. So what we did as a process, that we had volunteers, we had people interpretation guides, then we also introduced a project called ABC, Art by Children. So it's important that once we temporarily come up with a project of this nature, what from an organization point of view, we have tried to kind of to create perspectives out of it. So it has reached out. Such exercises we need to continue. So we also argued with the government with the ABC project. We need to have one classroom in every school, which becomes a site where a student can go even after 4 o'clock, after the school closes. He can go and engage in art making. So children go to kind of playgrounds. If he's interested in football or cricket or running or whatever, why not give them a provision? So we did, and we need to introduce that. And the last question about accessibility, I think we are in a very nascent stage when we still talk about it. Because we didn't systematically take those kind of possibilities to kind of educate people about different streams of art. We don't teach art as a subject in the schools. So we learn about art, if you're really interested in it at a certain age, and that's not enough. So we need to have movements to kind of...
Before I go to the next question that has come up, let me just remind that the next episode of All That's Kerala will be a fortnight from today, on the 26th of December, just after Christmas, on Saturday. We will be then talking about the cup that cheers, the drink of choice, tea and Kerala. And we'll have as our guest Dr. Sri Narendranath Dharmaraj, who until recently was a chief executive and whole-time director of Harrison Malayalam Kerala. Harrison Malayalam, one of the largest tea growers in the country. Sri Dharmaraj will take us through the magic of growing tea in the hilltops of Munnar and other places in Kerala, and the issues and problems related to tea planters, and of course, the future of the tea industry in the state. Let me move on with the next question, which has come in. This is from Chandra Mohan Nair. Again, he's based in Mumbai, and he asks whether you can also suggest ways of improving community space through art, and how community groups can help the promotion of art.
See, from what I learned from Kochi by doing this project, I think as a case study, I feel any community or any urban space or even small town, they love art projects if it is capable of telling their stories. So if it becomes a kind of location creating or telling many stories. So I think what is lacking in that area is that we don't have proper infrastructure. But sitting in a place like Bombay, I think it is very much possible, and we have in a small community projects which is based in Bandra. We have this projects like Kalagoda, though it was not really extending into kind of a immediate community but I strongly feel from my experiences that any project which celebrates the local, the inhabitants of that place, really takes deep root, and it grows there. it is the right seed which you're putting in, and people want art. So because I've had experiences, even people telling, the seniors telling us, if you protect art, in according to the many of experiences, if you protect art, art will protect you. So I still remember people to inspire us, just don't leave it aside. Whatever you guys are doing, challenging the system against all odds, it is actually a great investment, a cultural deposit which you're doing. Yeah.
You just spoke about a students' Biennale, you spoke about ABC, art by children. Are we compartmentalizing art too much? Can we then look forward to a women's Biennale, an old man's Biennale, a senior citizens Biennale? Are we compartmentalizing art too much?
No, it is part of the existing, educational structure. I mean, we just followed that. I mean, because nowhere in the world there is students biennial. I mean, I'll tell you what happens with the students biennial. The first edition, what we were able to do was that, I mean, we could take a blueprint of the nation itself. What is our young students thinking? A student from Srinagar or, a student from Aurangabad. So the art made it possible because there was something created, about their angst. So it's a right proposal to kind of go forward, because we have students like, who are enrolling into art education for 5 years. It's almost like, going to study medicine, and what happens to them. So it was our responsibility to kind of bring them to a place that where masters, major artists are doing or bringing their work. So it becomes, that's why I use the term that, that Kochi became a site of learning even for the students who were exhibiting there. They were traveling in, we were giving them workshops, scholarships, and they were coming and spending time in Kochi. The same thing with children. So how do you, you have a 4-month long project. It's a season which you're getting. So how do you bring the children to engage with the temporary museum structure or a temporary art site? And they were, literally coming and enjoying it. I mean, there is nothing like, the way, this is not compartmentalization. This is like a beautiful structure. There is no gender difference in it. It is the ongoing. I mean, I remember talking about students Biennale outside India, so people wanted to kind of model it. When Australia, one organization from Liverpool wanted to kind of to sign off ABC with it, because they never thought about ABC. I mean, ABC can mean art by children, so that's, I think some of Kochi's intervention has been helpful in, putting the seed.
Thank you, I think.
Yeah.
Right.